So anyway, they sent us up there, and Patton tried 3 times, and he was repulsed because they had a big reserve of tanks, Tiger tanks. So they sent us up there to a little town called Himmelgeist, which is almost the gateway to the Ruhr Valley. And we went across in assault boats at night across the Rhine River, 1 mile wide. And we made the attack into Himmelgeist, and we had to stay there, keep attacking until the Germans moved that reserve. And they finally did, and we could hear the tanks clanking down the cobblestone roads. And when they came in to pick us up with the assault boats, we got on board, and we started to leave, and the tanks had arrived in by the shoreline of the Rhine, and they started shooting at us, and they killed quite a few of us from cannons from the 88s, the Tiger tanks. And anyway, about that time, Patton made his big attack. He did break through because the reserve tanks were gone. They were beating us up. And so he made the attack across the Rhine, Ruhr Valley, and split it in half, and then they quartered it, and the Rhine collapsed, and over 1 million German soldiers surrendered in 2 weeks. Germany then collapsed, the heart was gone. And we was in a rush to go across Germany, and we finally made it. Everybody's in a rush for Hitler's house, and they say that 101st were the first ones there, and that's not true. There was a General O'Donnell who commanded the 3rd Division, and he had tanks, and all the bridges were blown going into Berchtesgaden, and one bridge was still saved. It was open, a wooden bridge. And he blocked that. He sent one of his battalions around as a battalion patrol to go into Berchtesgaden so he could have credit to being the first one in. And they did, they made it. They were the first ones into Berchtesgaden. And he backed his tanks out of the way of the bridge and allowed us to go through, so we were second, and the French were third. And of course, I turned 20 by this time, and we made it to Hitler's house, believe it or not. The SS tried to destroy it. They blew part of it up. They set fire to it, but it didn't burn. He built it not to burn. And so we went in there, and I think there was 11 of us left out of our 130 men originally. So 11 of us, we went in, and we sat on Hitler's bed, and we drank Hitler schnapps. And we got a kick out because we were drinking the finest wine in the world. And the Frenchmen were running in and taking the lamps and the pictures off the walls, paintings and so on, and rolling up the carpeting. And they took all that out. Well, the next day, the Frenchmen still had their carpeting, they still had their lamps, and they still had the pictures off the wall, and we had a headache and a bunch of empty bottles. But we were 19 and 20, we didn't care. We went down and got some more. Actually, things like that to us didn't have much value. In fact, the 101st recovered untold loot that was underneath there. I couldn't tell you, I got photographs of hundreds of bags filled with money and gold. And we recovered the Mona Lisa, and I don't know what all that Hermann Goering had in Fishkorn Castle. That was his home, and he had all these art treasures. But we knew who the Mona Lisa belonged to. We knew who owned these treasures. And General Taylor called in art experts, and they verified that they were genuine. And then all these artworks were returned to the original owners. How many countries would have done that for us? But we returned everything to them. But that's neither here nor there. The thing is, we did celebrate the end of the war there. And then we were pulled back. I pulled Army of Occupation for a while, and we were pulled back into a little town called Joigny, France. It's spelled Joigny, pronounced Johnny. And they broke the news to us. They said, well, guess what? We are going to make the initial invasion of the Japanese mainland. We were going to parachute behind like we did in Normandy. So I had to get my machine gun ready again and put a new feeder paw in it and whatever else, zero it in. And we were getting ready to jump into Japan, and they dropped a bomb, and we didn't know what it was. And some guy came to me and he said, hey, they dropped a new bomb and wiped out a whole city. And I said, baloney, I've been in a lot of bombings, and I don't know of a bomb that big. He said, no, this was about the same size as a football, and it destroyed the whole city. That's how much we knew about it. This thing was heavy, it was huge. But they did destroy the thing, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and then of course, the end of the war. And I finally came home, and when I did, I hit Michigan again, home to my mother, and I had to give her money to buy me some beer because I wasn't old enough to buy beer. I couldn't vote either. I couldn't vote, couldn't buy beer, couldn't buy a car on a contract. I was 20 years old, so I didn't mind really. It didn't hurt me. I think I was kind of numb in the head anyway. But anyway, after that, I traveled, and I always said, well, the war didn't bother me. I think, looking back, I think it did, because I think I held about 150 jobs in 3 years. But it's not that I couldn't hold a job, I just didn't want to. I'd work at a job for a while, and then I'd get up and leave. And I traveled from here to California. I took pilot training. I'm a licensed pilot, and I bought a plane, open cockpit, low wing. That's what I wanted, radial engine. And I went out west, and I worked at every job imaginable, digging wells to whatever, carpentry. And I came back here and met my future wife. We were married, and believe it or not, we have 5 children, 9 grandchildren, and 18 great-grandchildren, and 2 more on the way. And I gave a talk in Cleveland a couple of years ago, and had a lot of Army personnel there, and of course now they have women in the Army, and before when I was in, they had the wax, but they didn't have it right in the Army. So I asked, when I got done, I asked for questions and answers, and so a couple of guys, they picked their hand up, well, how does a machine gun, how do you like the 30 caliber over the 50, and it went on and on. Finally a woman stuck her hand up, and I said, yes, ma'am, and she said, Mr. Burgett, what single factor do you attribute to your longevity in marriage? Because my wife and I now, we'll be married 54 years next June. And she said, well, what single factor do you attribute to your longevity in marriage? I said, fear. Got the same reaction. Well, you figure it out. We got a divorce. There goes my shotgun, my dog, my canoe. So she had the advantage. But anyway, that brings us back home, and at the age of 20, and from there to here. And I really, from the inside looking out, I'm still 20. But I know better because I have to have I don't need it all, only when I walk. And anyway, we have about 10 minutes. If you want lights, that's okay. Or if you don't, that's okay. But are there any questions? I know somebody, yes?
Could you say something about how you started writing about your experiences?
That I started writing?
How did you start?
Oh, how did I start? Well, I wanted to do something, and I wanted to tell about our experiences in the war, about my comrades. Most of my comrades, what we did, the ones that I'm close to. And there was a series on television at this time when my kids were very small. It was called Combat, and I think Murrow's was the lead man. And anyway, my kids, after each program, they heard me talking to other people, and the kids are listening all the time. You don't think they are, but they hear everything. And they said, is that where you fought in the war, Daddy? I said, no. Next week, again, the series. And is that where you fought in the war, Daddy? No. And this went on. Finally, I said, well, geez, I ought to write it down and let them know where their dad fought in the war, so that they could read it someday and know. Don't keep it a secret. So I got a old A&P shopping bag and a pencil, and I started writing. Well, I ran out of room because I did more than what the bag would hold. And so I finally graduated, and I went out and got a ballpoint pen and a pad. And I started writing on that, and then I thought, well, I've got to have something else. I've got to have a typewriter. Computers weren't in yet. And so I had an Aqualung. And when I was out in California, like I said, I did everything. And I read in Life magazine where this Frenchman had invented a device to swim underwater and breathe. So I wrote to Life magazine, and I got his address, and I wrote to him, and he asked for a price, and he gave it to me, and I sent him the money. He sent me the Aqualung.